the focus on certain certain policies remain the same in the West, no matter who is in power, so to speak. And I think this goes back to the historian in me. It goes back basically to the Boer War, where there was the first time where you could see in the modern era, where you could see a group of politicians, industrial men, and media personalities create the fabrics for starting a war. The Second Boer War was basically started due to fear-mongering in the Times and what was in essence a false flag in South Africa in order to be able to let the British troops go back into South Africa and, gain the control of the wealth and resources that the Boers then had as an asset. Then came the First World War, which when you look into it and you look at the movements, at the available documents, you can see that there was a push to create a war already in 1912 with the fleet incident in Tunis concerning a German ship and Italian and British, but that was de-escalated. But they were always looking and pushing for this spark, and I'm talking about mainly the British now, because they did not want competition from the Germans. Now, once the Germans has been pacified, you can always look to history and see that the British have always had a thorn in their side towards the Russian and Chinese continent, because this land mass could potentially threaten their navy power, their global power, uh, which runs by the sea. If Russia and China and India, God forbid, from a British point of view, were to be united, it would be detrimental to certain industrialists and people in power within London and today also Washington. So I think it's always been a British focus to continue the policies of dismembering and dismantling and picking apart the Russian Empire, which is basically happening today. I mean, it was clearly done so during the Cold War. And during the Cold War, you succeeded in partly dismembering the Russian Empire when you divided the Soviet Union. And I think one of the American politicians, the more hawkish ones, if it was the former Vice President Cheney or if it was Pompeo, I can't remember. One of them said that the mistake was not to having dismembered Russia even more when the Soviet Union collapsed. And so I think that this thread with uh, creating accidents for dissident Western politicians and continuing a warlike rhetoric in relationship to Russia, but also any other country outside the Western sphere of influence that dare oppose them. It's something that runs no matter the politician in charge. So you regulate your friends or so-called friends, so you could also use the word vassals. You regulate your friends or vassals by either creating accidents or by using lawfare, as they did recently in Romania. Where the Romanian presidential candidate was on very flimsy legal grounds was pushed aside. So this is how you regulate your NATO allies or vassals. And then when it comes to your pure enemies, you continue to have a policy of confrontation with these, and you continue to create fear within your allied nations amongst the public. And as I've seen it from a historical vantage point, reading books from the different eras along from the late 19th century onward, it's quite obvious that no matter the social democratic or Christian democratic politicians in charge, it's always been the same thread coming out of the home of the Western Empire. And that has been a policy of confrontation and definitely not neutrality or diplomacy. I'm very sad to say.
Yeah, but I share that assessment. I mean, I had a discussion earlier today with Jeffrey Sachs, and he points out that the right way of actually trying to create peace is by thinking in spheres of security, that you need borderlands, you need cordon sanitaires that are shared. They don't need to be disarmed, but they need to be no man's land in the sense that they do their own thing and make sure that this side doesn't threaten that side and that side doesn't threaten this side, and put physical space in between. And Sweden was part of that. Finland understood that maybe even more than Sweden, that they are responsible to make sure that the Soviet Union doesn't feel threatened from its flank. Yugoslavia was part of that. Austria, Switzerland are to a lesser extent, but still. And we've had that, of course, in the 19th century, and we see how today it seems that it is a matter of course that countries as distant from the United States as Ukraine are considered spheres of interference for the United States, right? Places where they legitimately can and must and should change politics, including elected leaders like Viktor Yanukovych, by making sure that things happen that chase them out. And we know by now that the Maidan itself, the people who shot at both sides, were shooting from the protesters' side, but they shot at both of them in order to create the political cloud to make sure that this president can stay on. So I mean, there's this history, and you're pointing that out absolutely correctly. It goes more than 100 years back of trying to foment this type of mass violence in order to fight against others. And Brian Berletic would call that the continuity of agenda over time. It
Yes,
doesn't matter.
yes,
But you're pointing out it's not just the United States. This has been done by the Western powers, the Anglo-Saxon powers, and it was the British first, and they handed over the staff to the US, and they are continuing that very long, basically civilizational Western trajectory of trying to dominate everybody else. Is that about it?